When you talk about your colleagues having to balance these really quite serious dilemmas, can you tell us who those colleagues were? I mean, clearly most of us were deliberately misled about this over the course of a number of years. Who were the people who, from the moment you realized that Socrates basically couldn't be salvaged and you were going to have to get out of this toxic contract with autonomy, who were the people who were in your confidence from the start and were having to help you in this difficult task? Can you tell us that? And at what point did you let EDT and the people working at the top of the actual program know? Because presumably all these other people were working conscientiously on this project, putting in a lot of time, and were, for reasons that you've explained, you decided was, the trade-off was worth it. But who knew from the start, and when did you tell your management board?
So a couple of things, because words here are really important. So can I just ask you about a couple of words? I think you said toxic contract. Can you
Yes.
unpack what you mean by toxic?
You had a contract with Autonomy. Autonomy were going to produce something for us, which we were managing. At some point, you realised that it wasn't going to work anymore, and the contract was something you had to get out of fast. But to break the contract would obviously mean massive loss to BBC Monitoring, public money. You couldn't do that, as you said. You took legal advice that the best thing to do was to play Autonomy along until you could get to a point where you could make it clear that it wasn't us, the contractee, that was at fault, but them, the contractor, to use those terms. So I would call that a toxic contract, a contract you have to get out of.
Right. Well, I mean, I suppose
it became toxic.
Yes, it became. Well, once you realised that if they weren't going to build the thing, it was, in business terms, they sold you a pup. The point at which you realise that the contract becomes a drain on our resources, and you just want to get out of it, don't you? But you don't want to invoke penalty clauses or litigation. You want to get out of it with the least financial and moral impact on us. I would call that a toxic contract. Well, I mean, it's not your fault it's toxic. It's gone bad. You want to get out of it.
I mean, we're all free to give descriptions of things we want to, but in the world in which we were trying to operate, those phrases, for a start, don't enter into those kind of conversations, and they're not the way that a business like the BBC enters into thinking about contracting or coming out of a contract. Because if you start to think that way, you very quickly lead yourself into a position where you end up with deeply diminished ability to get the best value for the BBC. So I suppose the first learning point is, while in this kind of conversation we can give names to all sorts of things, those kinds of words and those kinds of expressions are not things that one can use in the kind of process that we would, and if we had used them, we wouldn't have been in.
Which is why, fortunately, we're sitting around this table talking, and I explained the term to you. Any other terms that you have problems with?
Well, I've got a few problems with the way in which you've kind of chosen to characterise what's going on. I think you said that I had deliberately misled staff?
Yes.
Okay, can you give me some examples?
Every single briefing that I'd read, right up until I think the December one, when the destructive build failed, were telling us that everything is going really well. Anecdotally, people working on the project have been told consistently that it's working. There are problems, obviously, but like search is working, it's just we don't quite understand it. This is the sort of thing that leads people to believe that it is going to be deployed. It's all there, it's in writing. If you knew that this was not true when it was happening, you were misleading us. And I'm not necessarily saying that is a bad thing, because in the context you're talking about, sometimes you have to choose between a greater and a lesser evil. But the reason that you have very kindly come to our team is to address the question not of the actual Socrates project, of course, but trust, as Santa mentioned. It is if you destroy trust, it's very difficult to rebuild it. And as you said, it does seem to be a nebulous thing, but it is a really important thing in any business organisation, in any public sector, in any relationship of any sort, even a personal relationship, maybe even more so. That is the problem there. If people were getting this message, basically if they've been told it's going okay, but you knew it wasn't going okay, you were misleading people. Sometimes you have to. It's a difficult decision, but I think that is not a loaded term. If I'd said you had, deliberately lied to us, I think that would have been quite an aggressive term, but you were misleading us. We were going this way, but you were telling us we were going that way. That's, to my point of view, is misleading. You see what I mean?
Well, actually, no, I don't see.
Well, maybe you don't agree with my term, but you do see what I mean, don't you? It's that you were telling us it was going okay, but it was going far from okay, and you were looking for the right moment at which to tell us what happened.
Could be shared for the
Yeah.
reasons that Chris has explained.
Yes.
Let's put it differently.
It's like Plato's
I think it is helpful.
cave, isn't it?
Thank you for that, because, in a world where we're kind of sharing thoughts and concerns between us, and in a world where we're just coming off the back of that very difficult kind of respect at work report, I find your comments about me deliberately misleading people actually
I think
very hurtful and
Well, there was no personal
professionally damaging.
no personal intent.
Something I regret you saying, and would maybe take away and think about whether you might wish to withdraw that at some point.
I shall give it due
Coming
consideration.
to a substantive point, I think we were presented with a series of very difficult decisions at many points. I recognise that we could not take everybody, all 400 people in use monitoring, into our confidence at every stage. It was something I personally regretted. It was something that I had to make a difficult decision about. It was something that, to answer the other part of your question, which I will address, it's something that we discussed at the board here, something we discussed at the newsgroup board, and something we discussed at the BBC Finance Committee on a number of occasions. And on all of those occasions, they were really deep and profound and very professional conversations. Conversations that didn't use the kind of phrases or charges that you just used in the question to me.
Well, you see, I'm not one of your decision makers, and I wasn't taken into your confidence.
well,
What I was asking was, when did basically the broader management of monitoring, for example, well, I'd give a specific example, the leadership group, I would imagine they were told before us. When did the leadership group become aware of this?
No, we weren't able to widen it out even to that extent.
So they knew just before we did.
So we maintained that it was the board who knew about it, the board of Global News Division, the Chief Legal Officer of Global News, the BBC Chief Litigation Officer, and the Director of News and the BBC's Finance Committee.
Mm-hmm.
But a very limited number of high-level people who are directly concerned with the legal and financial aspects. So
Yeah.
I think that answers the questions about those involved. Mike, you had a question?
Yeah, I mean, sort of looking forward now, really. I mean, maybe it's because I've used a lot of software that isn't normally issued to people, but I'm finding, maybe it's having an effect on my computer, but I'm finding Monarch now really flaky and NQE, and so, and yet I hear nothing about anything about a new production system or part of this or anything to replace it, and we're trying to do more multimedia work in Media Hub, and we're having to basically go out ourselves in the open market to get software and whatever.
Yeah.
I just sort of like a sense of, me personally, like a sense that people are thinking about this and actually doing something about it. I don't really see anybody grasping where is our new content production system with multimedia capability going to come from.
Right. Okay.
If I may attach a footnote?
Yeah, go on. Yeah.
To save me asking a separate question. So there are two elements, I think. One is what Mike's talking about, the production system.
Yeah.
The other elements, which you have addressed previously in briefings and another meeting, which is the test and try, and that's basically to use different basic software in order to enhance what we currently do.
Yeah.
So that's separate. That, I think, we can all see the value of,
Yeah.
rather than having an all-embracing system
Yeah.
like Socrates had been planned to.
Yeah.
But the thing that is really worrying is the actual production system, which is now coming to 20 years.
Yeah, absolutely. But I suppose what I would observe and try and answer Mike's question is some of that learning that we're getting from those individual bits of software are absolutely going in to inform what we might procure and also how we might procure precisely the thing that we want. Okay? So I suppose that's the first point, because as you've observed, the software market has moved on of all recognition in the last 4 or 5 years. I suppose the other thing I would say is that we again we couldn't share this widely because this would have influenced HP's position about negotiating, influenced HP's view of our negotiating position. We did a lot of work during last year on what we kind of called a Plan B, which is how could we achieve the desired outcome without using anything from